So again, thanks everybody for getting on the June 21st, 2023 version of the UPMA Legislative Impact Call. It's been, it's summertime, so we got over the crisis with the debt ceiling. So we're actually talking to, Congress about issues now. Been several fundraisers, a couple this week even. Hence the hat. Watch the Cardinals. Watch the Cardinals lose today, which is great. So anytime the Cardinals lose, I'm a big fan. But Brian, do you want to just get us up to speed where we are politically?
Yeah, thanks, Edmund. So, the bulk of our push, before the debt ceiling and since has been focused on three things. First, of course, is weapon GPO. We're now over 182 co-sponsors for the weapon GPO repeal bill, HR 82. It's no mystery that spending is not the most sexy thing these days, particularly amongst House Republicans. But we continue to add a lot of really great Republicans and Democrats to the weapon GPO bill. We've been really focused on adding members of the Republican Conference on Ways and Means. So the most recent Ways and Means Committee add was Nicole Meliatakis earlier this month from New York. We're working on other members of the Ways and Means Committee, Republicans like Claudia Tenney, Blake Moore, Mike Carey, from New York, from Utah, from Ohio. So members across the country that represent our folks who are impacted. We think if we continue to slowly add Ways and Means members, we can get some pressure on the chairman of the committee, Jason Smith from Missouri, to hopefully try and figure out what his position is and work with us to come up with a compromise. So continue to make progress there. Of course, the magic number is 218, and I think we're going to continue to work to get there in the not too distant future. Second issue is introduction of the Title 39 bill. We've been in conversation with Andrew Gavarino from New York about getting that introduced. We have final text. It's with Legislative Council, and we will get that hopefully introduced sometime here before the August recess. I don't know if it's going to happen before 4th of July, just based on everything else that's going on. But our goal is before the August recess to get that introduced in the House. Third is the ongoing discussions around health benefits. A lot of concern from senators and from House members on the health benefits program, and want to make sure that's rolled out successfully. And so mostly oversight happening there with the House and Senate committees of jurisdiction. So politically, those are our big areas of focus right now.
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned the health plan. So you're going to hear a lot of messaging from us. We probably should just make it a regular segment on this call until it implements. So we're all fully versed on what it's going to mean for our members, especially our retirees, with the new Postal Service health benefit plan. There's the lady that's heading up the implementation for the post office is committed. Headquarters already committed to sending her as many chapter conventions next year as possible. She'll do 4 or 5 sessions in Denver. This year is a little less important than next year. Next November is the big date for that. But you got a dry run this November for open season to get in place. So there's a lot of information. As that information comes out, as with all things, it's not going to be perfect. But basically, if you are already retired, you know, and you're not in a plan like the mail handlers plan or the NALC or the APWU plan, that's a membership plan. If you don't do anything, they're just going to put, as long as your plan goes into Postal Service Health Benefits Plan, they're going to put you in that plan. But it's better if you make the choice. And I heard Carla in Georgia, and it's you can tell she's just starting out on giving the message, but it's something I hadn't thought of. I signed up for Blue Cross Blue Shield in 1998 when I joined the service, and I've never looked at it. I said it, I forgot it. I pay him every 2 weeks. Lucy had all her surgeries, and you know, everything was paid for, and I just never looked at it again. I might be doing, you know, I shop around for everything else, so maybe it's going to be a good thing for us to have a look at. The interface is supposed to be up and running soon, so you're going to hear a lot of information about that. You'll see prospectuses this year. I suggest we all do a dry run this year and look at what our health insurance is this year and position. What we're not going to know this year is which providers end up in, which carriers end up in the Postal Service Health Benefit Plan. I would assume all the big ones. I've talked to a lot of the Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Aetnas and the GEHAs and those. I imagine they're all going to be in. But you know, it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of moving parts. And the thing I worry about the most is people that aren't engaged, people that don't come to conventions, people that have been retired, and maybe don't even know it's coming, or aren't paying attention, don't even know it's coming. So we're really going to have to push it out there. They're going to do a lot of messaging. We're going to do a lot of messaging. So I'm glad you brought that up, and we'll be able to use it. It's nice to have a political talking point on an oversight where we can leverage that information for other conversations. So that's great. I do want to touch on PAC, PAC money, PAC donations. John, do you have some? You got some numbers for us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks, Mr. President. We have $81,500 so far this calendar year. That is unbelievable. I'm proud to say that's about 40% above SPLY. So
To use a postal term.
So that's really good. So we just keep it going, and we're going to do some big things at national and hopefully beat the lofty goal that you've set forth.
Yeah, no doubt. So just so everybody knows, it's almost a third. And when we set these goals, we get about a third of our money through the mailings and EPAC and stuff like that. We've got a third of our money at the chapter conventions and about a third of the national convention. So to be that far ahead with a big national convention coming and lots of little events following up that. So we're going to have a big year. So that's awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about spending that money. Dan and I can only spend it so fast here. There's two of us and three of Brian. We can only go to so many things in DC. So with it being an election, a presidential election cycle, there's going to be stuff back in the districts. I was talking to Congressman from Missouri yesterday and said, you know, hey, you know, make sure we're on your list. Send me some stuff if you've got something back in the district. Those tend to be a little more personable. Is that the right word, Brian? rather than the you know, they're all lobbyists. Like the event I was at yesterday, everybody was. I wanted to watch the game. They're all in there.
Intimate.
Right. There's a great word. Intimate. So by the time the congressman got to me, he just wanted to talk about the game, and you know, and we just got to know each other, which is fine. It was a first time meeting him, and so that's good. But you can get a lot of access, especially if you're a constituent. So chapters need to be looking for those opportunities. If you're in budget, on the budget already, if it's already a friend, and even if it's not, there's opportunities where we can we can make the best bang for our buck on that. As I've been traveling around the conventions, I know John's been to a couple of other chapter conventions. I think I'm on my 12th or 13th. A lot of great activity. Sometimes I see a packed table, sometimes I don't, which is fine. You know, it almost always is a group event. So we're putting it first and foremost. So I'm pretty proud of those efforts. So at this time, I'm going to ask Chris. Chris had some big news today. Actually, it was yesterday, he told us. And my first question was, well, how does that affect us?
Thanks, Edmund. Thanks. I just want to announce, thank you, Edmund. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, President Carley and Executive Director Hines. I just want to let everyone know that my firm promoted me to Deputy Managing Director of our DC office. They set up a bunch of manager directors of all the offices. We were acquired by a Florida law firm, so about 4 years ago. So we have about 12 offices. So I'm number 2 in the DC office, which I've always have been sort of in the ranking anyways, but now has been officially recognized by our CEO, Executive Director Hines had the privilege of having dinner with Congressman Blake Moore from Utah a few weeks ago when he was in town. He made all these meetings and strategy, and this was announced today. So I'm really proud to do that. It doesn't change anything with UPMA, but I think in fact, and I call on Dan if he wants to say anything. I thought having our CEO at the event with Congressman Moore was really something special. Was able to see the clients that myself and Brian was there as well as a colleague that we work on together, how there's a synergy, not just with what UPMA is doing on issues of postal, ensuring that the post office succeeds, but also on the political front that we speak with a much louder voice and we are much more impactful because we all try to row together and do these successful events. So just want to announce that everything stays the same. Looking forward to seeing everyone in Denver. You can always call me, email, text me anytime. I've gotten a couple of emails from folks.
Yeah, you're going to all those black tie affairs and not coming
I
to the
wish.
ball game.
And like any good new title change, there's absolutely no money.
Right, exactly. It's the best. Those are the best. When you get promoted and get the same, they just change your name, but you got to buy new business cards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But thanks, President
So
Carley.
we're pretty proud of you. And for those of you that don't know, the route that we ended up with Chris and Brian and Joel. Dan and I interviewed Chris. Gosh, how many years? 5 years ago now, Chris? 6?
5.
5.
It was 2018.
Yeah, 5 years ago. And Chris was working for a company called Iris Group that got bought out by Gray Robinson.
Yeah, it's been 5 years. It's been wonderful, and I love it. And it just comes back to my grandpa being a letter carrier and me working for letter carriers when I first came to DC. And to be able to do it in this role with UPMA is just so rewarding, and just appreciating all the folks that are on the Zoom and folks like Dan and Edmund and others that we get to work with every day.
Yeah, and it's we were talking at the game today with Brian and Joel, the idea that there's 3 and then there's a couple others ancillary. I introduced. I run into all kinds of different people that work with and around these 3. So we're getting top-notch representation, and it's we get them in some rooms and they get us in some rooms, and it's working out great. So I just wanted to highlight that. We always like it when one of our own does well, even if it was just a name change on the door. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions anybody has. It was a pretty quick call. It's that lull in the summer, but I wanted to keep everybody abreast of where we were. And for those of you that haven't had your chapter conventions yet, we got to keep that pace going for the PAC. Is there any questions for Brian or for Chris? And I think Joel. I see Joel. Yeah, Joel's here too. So
Yeah. Hey, Edmund, two issues I'll just raise really quickly for everyone's general awareness. They're not the most active issues, but they are things that do still regularly come up. One is on shipping beer and wine through the mail. UPMA last week sent a letter to Congressman Dan Newhouse from Washington State endorsing his legislation to allow the Postal Service to ship beer and wine. It is an issue that we are supporting as the PMG looks to diversify the ways that the organization can increase revenue and stick to its core mission. The second thing is that mail theft continues to be something that a lot of members of Congress hear about, ask us about in conversations, and want to know what are ways that we can keep the mail safe, the postal employees safe. So that's an issue that is constantly on the minds of members of Congress. So if you do run into them, whether it's them being customers at the post office or just out on the street at the grocery store, know that we continue to talk about making sure people are safe and the mail is safe and getting delivered in a secure way, because it is a politically hot issue today.
Yeah, and you'll see some clickbait. You'll see, I think there was an article came out today that says Postal Service tells people not to mail checks, which isn't exactly what they said. But in some of these higher crime areas, it might be better to bring your checks inside instead of putting them in a blue box, just to protect yourself. The mail theft, the attacks on carriers, the postal police / postal inspection service issue. The only other issue that we're kind of looking at on the periphery, there was a bill last year introduced on non-career or pre-career buyback time for federal employees. You cannot buy back any federal time after any non-career federal time after 1989. That's a law. You just can't do it. I know the rural carrier union tried to get that in a contract, and it's so there was a bill last year that I came across and dug up and sent to the guys, and we're looking at that sponsor to see if there's isn't something we can do with that going forward, because I know there's a lot of people that have PMR time that might add, if they could buy it back, could add years to their service and get them retired sooner. So that's the sort of thing that we talk about on the periphery, while we have web GPO's the driving force here, obviously, but if we can pick something else up on the as we're doing it, it's a good thing. So does anybody else have any other questions?
Hey, Edmund, this is Mark Mills from Tennessee chapter.
From Tennessee. I'll be in Gatlinburg Sunday night.
Lucky you, buddy.
Yeah,
I
can't
got
wait.
a question. This is sort of a personal question,
Yes, sir.
but I, of course, work in Tennessee, chapter president for Tennessee, but I live in Virginia.
Yep.
And I haven't been to anything really legislative because of the fact that I feel kind of weird that I'm not the constituent for
Sure.
the people that we talk to.
Here's how
Opinions from you or whoever else.
Sure. Well, here's how I used to run that in Illinois, because I get that all the time. Back when we had, I would go to fundraisers for people that I wasn't a constituent of, and we would do it all the time. Here's what I do. You represent, you're the president of the Tennessee chapter. You represent a postmaster that lives in that district. So even though you're not a constituent per se, you're still, it's like a representative democracy, right? You represent that person, great. Go to some Virginia fundraisers too, double dip there, Mark. Why wouldn't you? As a constituent, but you can also go, there's times when you go with your UPMA business card that says chapter president of all of Tennessee. So you're representing people that live, post offices that are in that district and people that are in that district. It's a little bit like Brian and Joel and Chris. They represent us, right? So you would be saying, hey, I'm here based on representation. Does that make sense?
It does. I just haven't been active in the legislative
Sure.
aspect because of that.
Yep.
I have plenty of good people that are legislative and very active. That's
And I
their
will tell you,
favorite thing to do. So
I will tell you, it's always better if they're actually a constituent. I always got a lot further with Rodney Davis than I did with Mike Buss, because I could have voted for Rodney, and I can't vote for Mike. So there's always that. But Mike,
that's always been my contention as well.
Right.
And I mean, I could go and hang out in DC for legislative, and I have family there, so that's not
Yep.
an issue. But I always felt like I would rather send someone else from Tennessee
Sure.
than me to take a place that I'm outside of Tennessee.
We do
I
it.
just wondered.
Lobby people. At that point, you become a lobbyist, and you lobby people. People lobby for constituents, and not being one all the time. They're kind of they're kind of used to that.
And I would also just say, really for Legislative Summit, we'd really encourage you to come because we would team you up with the Tennessee folks. The fact that you're president, I think that would really resonate. I know President Carley was just talking to, we've been doing a bunch of stuff with Senator Haggerty's folks, with Congressman Kustoff from the Memphis area on the other side of the state as well. I think to put that, even just a Tennessee president face to it would be beneficial to UPMA.
Yeah, I'll double down on that with Kustoff, especially with the problem in Memphis with some of the mail delivery.
Yep.
You know, so we can plug him into somebody that might have the pulse and might be able to, get him the real scoop on some of that stuff. So
Exactly.
there's many ways that you can. It's a great question, Mark. It's good for everybody that's on the call with the overlap that we have. If you represent a constituency, you represent a constituency, and you can lobby there. So great question.
I appreciate
Anybody
the
else?
Yeah.
interest.
The other thing I would just add to that, Mark, is, to Edmund's point, you were elected by your colleagues, and that does carry weight with elected officials. That you are a leader, you have that title, you have that role, whether it's legislative chair, PAC chair, state president. The fact that you are elected by your colleagues goes a long way to gaining credibility. When you say something to those members of Congress. So I would not be shy at all in using that agency.
Well, Edmund knows I'm not shy. So.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, it's imposing figure that you are. Let's intimidate.
I was thinking the same thing.
That's awesome. All right, anybody else? All right, guys, short and sweet this month.
Yep. Thanks.
Keep up the good work. We'll have a call in July. We probably won't have one in August because we'll be all be at the national convention. Keep the pressure on. If you guys need anything, Brian, Chris, and Joel aren't doing much this summer, so hit them up and if you like I say, if you can find those fundraisers to do back in the district, let us know.
Yeah,
All
I saw somebody just said, Dominic just mentioned Greg Murphy, Dr. Murphy from Eastern Tennessee, who's on Ways and Means. Again, Ways and Means oversight or committees that we care about. There's things happening locally, but also people that you think we should pay attention to as well.
Yes.
Jason Smith, the chair of Ways and Means, has been doing a series of dinners that Edmund's is part of a couple of them that are coming up now that he's back in town more. We should definitely add Greg Murphy to that list. Because he's met with our members consistently when people have come to town and others.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that Congressman Nickel also met with our members too. Good guy, good moderate Democrat from the Raleigh area.
Good deal. Thanks, Dominic. Thanks, Chris, Brian, Joel. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Awesome. And I will talk to everybody next month.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Aloha.